January 6th investigation. What a new report says about the attack on Capitol Hill. Border crisis. Vice President Kamala Harris makes a trip to Mexico to discuss migration. Prayers for peace. Pope Francis offers special intentions for those in the Holy Land and beyond. And religious freedom. How new sanctions include abusers in China. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, June 8th, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. A new Senate report reveals that major security breakdowns took place ahead of the January 6th attack on the Capitol. It finds rioters posted several violent threats online in the days and weeks leading up to the attack, but government agencies failed to act. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports. Eric.
Well, good evening, Tracy. You know, the bipartisan report was conducted by the Homeland Security and Rules Committees. It really showed that law enforcement officers, in particular Capitol Police, really struggled to find out the difference between real threats and protected political speech. Bottom line, it showed the Capitol Police were unprepared and didn't have the proper training for that amount of people. The 127-page report pieces together multiple warnings of violence that were poorly circulated and largely went unheeded by top leaders in several agencies, including the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security. The report shows how people shared online maps of tunnels in the Capitol and made statements days before the riot. Intelligence is faulted throughout the report. It states that a Capitol Police intelligence unit, quote, did not convey the full scope of known information to USCP leadership, rank-and-file officers, or law enforcement partners. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says he's confident the necessary changes will be made and doesn't believe a January 6th commission needs to take place.
Today's report is one of the many reasons I'm confident in the ability of existing investigations to uncover all actionable facts about the events of January 6th.
Also on Capitol Hill,
it was our understanding that the decision was solely ours as a private company to make the decision about whether to pay or not to pay.
The president and CEO of the Colonial Pipeline Company told the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee that his company paid nearly $5 million in ransom to the Russian group DarkSide Hackers. Since then,
we've been, once again, very open and transparent, hoping that everybody could not only be aware of the situation, but think about what they could do to help prevent that from occurring in their own company.
And since that cyber attack, we've seen attacks on a meatpacking plant. We've also seen attacks on the New York subway system. And right here on Capitol Hill, just today we've learned that cyber attack actually took place on the House side. About 60 House offices were affected. It affected a vendor, a tech vendor that provides constitutional law support to lawmakers, was hit by a ransomware attack. We did speak with Capitol Police, and they say that no personal data was affected. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Vice President Kamala Harris meets with the president of Mexico. This as the U.S. deals with a record number of illegal boarding crossings. The visit follows the vice president's trip to Guatemala, where she warned migrants fleeing to the U.S. do not come. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Tracy, good evening to you. Tonight, the U.S. faces unprecedented numbers of attempted border crossings. This as the White House is trying to find the root cause of immigration. Is this administration's perhaps biggest challenge?
Que nos visite la vicepresidenta Kamala Harris.
We will be speaking to the Vice President, and we're very pleased to have her here.
In Mexico, Vice President Kamala Harris meets with Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador as the U.S. tries to curb the spike in migration at the border.
This will be followed by the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding on International Cooperation between the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the United States Agency for International Development, with the President of Mexico and the Vice President of the United States as witnesses of honor.
The Interfaith Immigration Coalition reacted to the Vice President's earlier admonition warning migrants not to travel to the United States because of the danger, writing, It is not illegal to seek asylum in the United States. It is immoral to fail to see people seeking asylum for what they are, human beings who never planned to become refugees, but have been forced to flee or watch their children die. Meanwhile, in the press briefing room today, more information about President Joe Biden's upcoming trip overseas to meet with other world leaders.
I will say that he's been getting ready for 50 years. He has been on the world stage. He's known a number of these leaders for decades, including President Putin and including a number of the leaders he'll see at NATO and he'll see at the G7.
And in the president's upcoming U.S.-EU summit in Brussels, both U.S. and European bishops issue a joint statement reminding global leaders, even as the pandemic seems to be receding in some nations, it is still hitting others in the world very hard. On both sides of the Atlantic, it has also caused deep wounds and exposed our vulnerabilities.
Separately tonight, President Biden's federal budget proposal, we know, does not include Hyde Amendment protections, but it does include a term that's raising some eyebrows. It's called birthing people. It was used in a section discussing maternal mortality rates. In another section of that document, the word mothers is used. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
3 priests from the Diocese of Buffalo are on administrative leave pending the investigation of an abuse allegation. The diocese says an individual alleges being abused during the 1990s. Authorities have been notified. All 3 priests deny any acts of abuse. In Peru's presidential election, Pedro Castillo is claiming a narrow lead over Keiko Fujimori. Castillo is a former rural teacher. Fujimori is the daughter of the imprisoned former president. The margin is within 1%, with 96% reporting. A jihadist attack in the West African nation of Burkina Faso has killed at least 160 people, causing several thousand to flee.
La situation de Solhan constitue un nouveau défi pour nous, malgré tous les efforts que nous avons faits sur le plan militaire.
The country's prime minister visited the affected village, saying the attack took place despite efforts to improve security. Burkina Faso has struggled to confront militants like al-Qaeda and ISIS. In southern Pakistan, the death toll has risen to 65 from a pre-dawn collision of 2 trains. Just over 1,000 people were aboard both. Most were sleeping at the time when the first train derailed. Minutes later, the second train crashed into the first. Recovery efforts continue. A founder of Hezbollah in Lebanon has died. Ali Akbar Motashapour was allied with Iran's Islamic Revolution. The U.S. blames its militants for deadly Beirut bombings back in 1983. The current leader recently threatened a Middle East religious war over a mosque in Jerusalem. Pope Francis has set today aside to pray for peace in the Holy Land and Myanmar, also known as Burma. This morning, the Pope tweeted an invitation to set aside a minute of prayer for these 2 intentions. Both areas of the world are experiencing heightened military tensions due to religious and political conflict. North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un wants to improve his country's lagging economy. Kim addressed senior ruling party officials yesterday, calling for an improvement in living conditions. North Korea's economy has been crippled by decades of mismanagement, combined with U.S.-led international nuclear sanctions and the coronavirus pandemic.
國家去制定一個反外國嘅制裁法。
Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam says that she is pleased by a new law from China. According to state media, the mandate would allow Beijing to respond to sanctions from foreign countries. The chief executive says that it allows China to prepare to act on the principle of an eye for an eye. Well, as we reported last week, the Biden administration is expanding Trump-era restrictions on U.S. investment in some of China's high-tech companies. And one analyst is applauding the move. Writing in the Epoch Times last week, Nina Shea said in part, quote, this is as much a religious freedom and human rights sanction as a national security one. And Nina Shea joins us now. She is a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. Nina, welcome back. Always so great to be with you. As we mentioned, you say this move is as much about religious freedom as it is national security. Tell us more about that. Why do you say that?
Well, Tracy, the president emphasized in his executive order of last week that this is directed against the surveillance technology companies in China that are really targeting religious groups, and they're using religious groups as guinea pigs for what they're going to do to all Chinese people. These are companies that make facial recognition cameras that can scan your smartphone and collect all its data, the phone numbers, your contacts, without even using a security code or even you knowing it as you walk by, or have a back door to your devices and apps to find out what you're researching and what you're saying. So these are companies that are producing equipment that is designed to help China control behavior of its religious people and its citizens. So the Uyghur Muslims are the most surveilled people on earth in their capital. Cameras bristle from street corners, outside homes, outside mosques. And this has helped control their behavior according to Communist Party principles, which is hostile to religion. And it covered up a genocide for several years. It is also being used against Christians. And it is being used inside churches and outside churches. And a Catholic bishop was punished by such surveillance because he refused to join the Communist Party overseen church, the Patriotic Church. The government evicted him from his apartment on the 5th floor during the height of the coronavirus in China a year ago. They then, under international outcry, let him back. He was sleeping in the doorway outside. They let him back, but shut off all his utilities, his running water, his heat, his electricity. It forced him to leave his ministry, to go home to his family, to his village where he came from, and just to pray in solitude, he said. He could no longer function as a bishop under this. This was seen as so successful, these examples were seen as so successful by Beijing that they decided on May 1 to roll out these new religious affairs regulations that would impose this kind of surveillance, registration, and punishments and awards for the religious leaders across the country to all religions.
Nina, we don't have a whole lot of time left, but I'm wondering, what else do you want people to know about what's happening over there in China? And what else, if anything, do you think the U.S. should do about what President Biden calls an unusual and extraordinary threat?
Yeah, this is an unusual threat, and people should understand this because it's a bloodless threat and it's a silent threat. And the Chinese are trying to, the Chinese government is trying to export this around the world to autocrats throughout the world so they will use it on their own people. China wants to control the behavior and narrative of its own people and wants the rest of the world to be controlled according to its dictates as well. And this is a method that they're going to use. So it should continue to be expanded. This is just the beginning. It's companies that are part of their military-industrial complex, and China is a threat that we have never seen before. It's going to make a Big Brother look like an amateur, as Age of the Church and Need said. It is really Orwellian.
Well, Nina, we have to leave it right there, unfortunately, but thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us about this. Nina Shea, Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Coming up, abortion lawsuit, the failed attempt to block a sanctuary city for the unborn. And retirement plans. A departing Protestant pastor receives inspiration from Catholics. Influential evangelical author Rick Warren will retire after 4 decades as pastor of Saddleback Church in California. Among his partners in ministry was neighboring Catholic Bishop Kevin Vann. In a past interview with EWTN's Raymond Arroyo, Warren mentioned how Catholic devotions, heroic saints, and EWTN's programs influenced his life. A federal judge has dismissed a lawsuit by Planned Parenthood against new pro-life policies in Lubbock, Texas. The judge ruled Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider, does not have standing to sue the city. People in Lubbock voted last month to declare it a sanctuary city for the unborn. The ordinance took effect earlier this month. And joining us now is Lee Dickson, founder of Sanctuary Cities for the Unborn. Mark, great to see you again. Thanks for being with us. Tell us about this ruling. Why did the judge say that Planned Parenthood did not have the standing to bring a lawsuit? And also, how did you feel when you heard the news?
Well, the judge said that Planned Parenthood didn't have standing for the lawsuit because they lacked jurisdiction. The way that these ordinances are written, it's to survive a pre-enforcement challenge. And so we were really encouraged that the ordinance worked as well as we thought it would work. And more importantly than that, not just the ruling, but on June 1st, when this ordinance went into effect, Planned Parenthood made an announcement that if someone wanted an abortion, that they would have to get an abortion outside of Lubbock, because they could no longer do abortions because of this ordinance.
And does this ruling give you encouragement, Mark, in possibly helping other cities to become sanctuary cities? And also, what message do you think it sends to groups like Planned Parenthood?
Absolutely. Anytime there's a victory, it encourages other cities to move forward. And that doesn't mean that the cities that went forth without having to have the victories are any less. But of course, the more and more this happens, the more common this is, cities will be encouraged that they are making a safe decision, that this is something that cities across the state of Texas can do to protect the smallest and most vulnerable among them. And I think the message it sends to Planned Parenthood is that the days of cities doing nothing while they come into our cities and end the lives of innocent children made in the image of God, those days are over. That now cities have something that they can do to make sure that babies are never murdered by abortion within their city limits.
And Mark, for those who may not know, can you remind us again what it means to be a sanctuary city for the unborn?
Absolutely. So the cities that have called themselves sanctuary cities for the unborn, by passing an enforceable ordinance outlawing abortion within the city limits, what they're saying is that innocent children made in the image of God, that they cannot be murdered by abortion within their city limits. That there's a law on the books that says that abortion is illegal in these cities. So we're not saying that women in these cities can't go to another city to get an abortion, but we're saying that that action cannot take place within the city limits of these cities.
And Mark, we have probably about a minute or so left, but really quickly, what's next for you and also for your initiative?
Well, we just saw the 30th city pass an ordinance outlawing abortion within their city limits, the city of Levelland, that happened last night. Tonight, we're going to see if the city of Sundown is going to outlaw abortion. Many other cities here in Texas, we have cities in Ohio, in other places, and we're just going to keep on keeping on. And we're hopeful to see many more cities pass ordinances outlawing abortion within their city limits.
Mark, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for what you do. Lee Dickson, founder of Sanctuary Cities for the Unborn. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Up next, United Nations. Meet the new president of the General Assembly. And priestly encouragement. What the Holy Father told a group of priests from France. The United Nations General Assembly has elected a new president.
I wholeheartedly congratulate the Honorable Abdullah Shahid.
Abdullah Shahid from Maldives will assume the one-year post in September ahead of the UN's annual meeting of world leaders. He will succeed the current Assembly President, Volkan Bozkır from Turkey. And finally tonight, Pope Francis met with a group of priests from France yesterday, and he told them weakness is a chance for an encounter with God.
Cari fratelli sacerdoti, vi invito ad avere sempre orizzonti grandi.
Talking to a community of French priests studying in Rome, the Holy Father warned them against being an intellectual rather than a pastor. He added that their studies will prepare them to deliver the gospel of joy. Joining us now is Father Felipe Herrera Espelot, official of the Dicastery for Communications. He is also a member of the French community of the Church of St. Louis of the French in Rome. Father Felipe, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you tell us more about this audience with the Pope and also about his message on how weakness can bring us closer to God?
Well, thank you, first of all, Tracy, for your invitation. I'm more than glad to be sharing with you these insights. This was a wonderful opportunity 10 days ago. We received the invitation of the Pope. And as I work on Dicastery for Communications, I can see that the Pope is constantly receiving people. But I had never been received as a priest with my fellowships, with my fellow priests that live with me. So it was an amazing opportunity. And it was about midday. The Pope had already received several persons, and we expected him to be very tired, but he was not. He was very enthusiastic. So he delivered a speech that he had prepared, but he stopped at some moments, and he just added things that came out from his heart. And that was maybe the most important thing. Our weaknesses are, I would say, that's part of the core of his message, and it's part of our Christianity, of the theology of incarnation. We do not have to be perfect people to love God, because the first thing that we have to do is to let ourselves be loved by him and be forgiven by him. And that's where our fragilities, our weaknesses appear as an important space to encounter God and make the deepest experience of his mercy. And particularly as priests have to know that, we have to experience that in order to teach the rest of the people of God to make the same. Maybe for years, decades, we had been taught that we have to be perfect in order to achieve God's love. Instead, it's God that comes to our encounter to love us, and our wounds, all our weaknesses are that particular place where he reveals all his love for us. No matter what we have done, he wants our conversion, but he is almost begging for our love, for us to let ourselves be loved by him.
That's such an important message. I also know that you are part of the French community. And can you tell us about your group and what you do, and also what the priests are studying right now?
Well, I live in this French community. I'm half French, half Chilean. And I was received in this community where the biggest part of the community is of young priests that come from France and that they are pursuing their different studies here. Theology, moral, scripture, so our life here is very interesting because everyone is studying different things. So we are all the time learning the ones from the others. But there are also other priests from Italy that is a very well-known teacher here in Rome. There is another priest from Haiti, another priest from Russia. He's an Orthodox. So we live as well the communion with our brothers from other Christian denominations and other Christian churches. So that's very important. And in this case, we were together united, but not only because of our language, which is the official language here at my house, French, but because we are all priests and called by God to serve the people of God. So we have a real nice life here, very fraternal. We really love each other as friends, respecting our diversity, but at the same time seeing in that diversity a manifestation of the Holy Spirit that is talking in our hearts.
Father Felipe, thank you so much for your time today and speaking with us. We really do appreciate it. Father Felipe Herrera, as Polyot official of the Dicastery for Communications. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, and may God bless you all.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.